Hello, welcome to Journeying With, a Jesuit Missions podcast. I'm Colin, the Advocacy and Campaigns Officer at Jesuit Missions. Philip Harrison is a Jesuit priest and on the staff at the Manchester University Chaplaincy. Next month, he will swap the north for the south and run the London Marathon, all in aid of Jesuit Missions. I caught up with him to check up on his progress and to see how his training was going.
Could you just tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Phil Harrison. I'm a Jesuit in Britain, and I work as a university chaplain in Manchester at the Church of the Holy Name.
Have you been a Jesuit for a long time?
I've been a Jesuit for a long time, but I'm in a phase of training between the end of theology and ordination and tertianship, which is like a 6-month experience that comes right at the end of formation. So I'm still technically in training, and not just in training as a Jesuit, but also in training for the London Marathon this year.
So has exercise always been important in your Jesuit life?
No, when I was in the novitiate, it was remarkably unimportant. I remember I was pretty lazy and found it difficult to do anything except walking. I used to enjoy walking, and we did a lot of walking. But I had a kind of experience of conversion when I finished the novitiate and started in philosophy, because we had a really good ethics teacher at Heathrow College called Terry Walsh, and he used to run a marathon every single year. And he used to ask us this question: how do you live a good life? And he gave us various different ethical theories for us to study and to learn, and asked that we try and appropriate them to understand them in a deeper way and use them in our lives. And so I used to meditate on Immanuel Kant and on Aristotle and on John Mills and utilitarianism to try and find out which way of thinking about being a good person was going to be the most helpful. And I used to test them out by seeing which of these theories would motivate me to go for a run every single day when I was living in Stamford Hill. And so I tried Immanuel Kant, which was the way of obligation and of doing the thing that everybody else should do. I tried John Mill, which was thinking about the effects and the benefits of running. And then I tried Aristotle, which is basically the idea that if you run, you'll just be happy and start to flourish. And I found that to be the most useful way of thinking and motivating me to do good things and to live a good life. And that's what keeps animating me to run still. So it was all based on that experience of learning about ethics from a teacher who used to run the marathon every single year, and also trying to lead a good life myself and working out what would motivate me to do good things, both for my body but also for other people.
Okay, healthy body, healthy mind.
Healthy body, healthy mind, those two things are very closely linked, I think. If you have a good way of thinking, a positive way of thinking, then that'll also lead to a change in your body. And we live in a society that thinks that you've just got this body for today. We don't think about the fact that I'm going to have to use the same body in 2 weeks' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time. And so we don't look after it in that way. So there's an invitation for me, as I'm training for this marathon, to think about that, to have that change of perspective, to know that the exercise that I'm doing today is going to make me stronger and more fit in the future too when I'm older.
And this isn't the first marathon you've run?
So I ran the marathon back in, I think it was 2012, just when I was in my last year of philosophy at Heathrow College in London. And the first time I heard about the marathon was when I was living in London for my philosophy studies, and there were lots of Jesuit scholastics, Jesuits in training, who were running it for Jesuit Missions, and I was living with some of them, so I was really inspired by their motivation and their energy. And so we used to go down and cheer at the side of the race in Bermondsey with the other Jesuit Mission staff. And I remember one year I was there and I received my phone call which told me that my mum had been taken into hospital, and 2 weeks later, very sadly, she died. But when I came back to London after going to study theology in Columbia and also working in Edinburgh as a teacher, I decided that I wanted to run the London Marathon, partly in her memory, but also to support the work of JRS, the Jesuit Refugee Service, who I was working for at the time. And coincidentally, I was also working in the same parish I'd been standing outside a few years before when I received the news that my mother had been taken into hospital, and that community were incredibly supportive. They really supported me in the run-up to the race, and also on the day itself, because the race went just by the church, so they all came out after Mass and were cheering me on. And I think that is one of the feelings you get when you're running the London Marathon, is the support of London, the way that the London people really support you. Much as they complain about the parking that gets disrupted, there's a real sense of the spirit of London and the spirit of the nation as well, I think, at that moment, because people come there not just from London but different parts of the UK and indeed the whole of the world.
So last time you ran for JRS, but this time you're running for Jesuit Missions, and you know a bit about Jesuit Missions because you volunteered with us.
Yeah, so again, at about the time I volunteered in Kyrgyzstan, there was a summer program where you could go there and teach English for a few months. And I went out there, we visited the capital city Bishkek and got to know a bit of the culture and also some of the young people we'd be working with. And then we took them up to Lake Issyk-Kul, which is near to the border with China, a really beautiful part of the country at quite a high altitude, where the Jesuits have founded a summer house to look after people with disabilities, but also young people who want to learn English. And so we spent some time there, and I found it really rewarding to be with those people, to accompany them both in their study of English but also in their lives of faith and so on. So it was a very special experience.
So you know what you're fundraising for because you've volunteered with us before.
Yeah, and of course the other story is that I went off to Guyana when I was studying theology in Colombia and visited a church in a village rather in the indigenous region of Kawasabay and laid the foundations of a church there. So that was another example of how I've been working in the area where the Jesuit Missions are working. So, yeah.
And how is your fundraising going, and how do you plan to get to the golden £2,000?
There's still a long way to go. So at the moment I'm organising some different events and thinking about how I could do that. And also I'm going to be contacting the parish where I was a few years ago when I ran it before, and I'm asking their help both to support me on the day of the race so they can come out of the church and cheer me on, but also for their financial help. So, yeah.
And how is your training going?
Training's going very well. So my methodology or my way of thinking about the training is you've got to work to your limits, and your limits will naturally begin to expand. It's a tip from Haruki Murakami, quite a famous Japanese writer who's been translated into English and other languages, who wrote a book, What I Talk When I Talk About Running. And one of his tips is to keep working to your limits. The idea of the proximal zone of development. Don't try and overstretch yourself by doing too much, because you risk injury and you risk being overtired. And don't do too little, because you risk becoming a bit lazy and not making the progress that you want to make. So if you just keep working to your limit, keep working to your limit and let that limit just naturally expand, you'll be able to do more and more and more. It's a great tip also for your spiritual life and for your emotional life. Just don't try and do too much, don't do too little, but just work on your limits and letting those limits expand.
And how does it feel on marathon day when you're running through the streets of London and, especially when you're getting to the finish line?
Pain, excruciating agony, exhaustion, thirst, a strange sense of what on earth did I think I was doing when I agreed to run the London Marathon for Jesuit Missions. There's a great sense of anticipation in the beginning, which is really wonderful. And as you get out of, I think it starts in Greenwich Park, and you get out of Greenwich Park, there's a great sense of running with the other races. And you have to be a bit careful psychologically that you don't let competition kind of come in, you don't look at other people, you just focus on doing your own personal best. And as you start to do that, you get into the zone, and then it becomes quite beautiful to see the different sights and sounds of London, and to feel the real surge of support of the Londoners who come out to wait on the side of the streets to cheer people on. It's a really special experience. And as you get nearer to the kind of, it's really the last third of the race that is a real killer. You're really feeling pretty exhausted, really on the limits of what you can do, and you just have to keep going at that point, just to keep going, and finally you get there, and the tremendous experience of just getting over the finish line is really indescribable. It's a wonderful experience.
So thanks for Philip for his tips and his time to fundraise for Jesuit Missions. Please consider donating to his or one of our other 26 runners using the QR code and the web link attached. Thanks for joining. Take care.